Yeah, because a lot of people have respect for art, and so instead of me come up to like to talk to them, like if I did a painting, then they could really see how it affects you. Like you can tell your emotion in painting, or when you dance, or when you sing. So people kind of get the information from there.
Music has always been a passion of mine, and it's always been something that's been kind of, you would think of it as a backseat, but it's changed people. It's given them strength when they've needed it, and art can do the same thing. It can open their eyes and show them, hey, this is going on.
I try, as I said, I try to treat people the way I would want to be treated. And I just wish that more people, and that's not to say that there aren't a lot of people that don't already do that, but sometimes when I hear comments, I just wish people would stop and think.
Well, I mean, obviously, people always want to say parents are at the core of everything, but media has a strong hold of a lot now. Yeah. So what you read, what you see, what you listen to, seems to dictate a lot more about how people think than probably before. I guess I could say still, even though I'm pretty young, that I wasn't influenced as much by media. So I would say, when I'm dealing with young people, it's just not to sway their thinking, but it's just to kind of teach them how to be conscious of, again, how they treat themselves, how they treat other people, and how to recognize, those types of treatments and how to deal with them.
To me, prejudice is creating opinion on someone without proper evidence, without having all the clues, trying to just look at someone and saying, well, he's dressed this way, so he must act this way. Personal experience, I think, tells all of us that that's not the case. But it takes that involvement with other people to see those preconceived notions erode. So yeah, I would say that there's all sorts of prejudice. Racism is a good portion of one, but there are economic precedents. You see someone from the other side of the tracks and you assume that they have certain limits or certain intellect, and you find that that's just not the case in actually working with people.
By issues-based education, we're taking those 2 or 3 boxes, putting them together, so that's the seamless part of it. So that they learn how to use and apply those 3 or 4, and then take in something and use the process so that they're continuing to work that way instead of thinking in small segments and just for the time being, just for that space. It's a way of life or a way of thinking that they have to do.
I believe Manu Agarwal, kind of her situation with being in cultural racism, spoke to me. I knew of religious racism already and, skin colored, all of that, but I never really thought of a cultural difference and how people can be so close-minded that they won't allow the differences that cultures can have enter their thoughts and minds. They just don't like it that much that they refuse to accept it.
Well, I think that, I don't like the word racism. I just don't think I don't know. I guess to me, I don't see the difference between racism and prejudice. To me, and I talked to you, Mike, about this, and I said you had used the 4 terms in your teaching that you did last year. It was racism, prejudice, and tolerance. Right. And I asked you, I said, where's the word respect? It's just, to me, it's a lack of respect. And I think even I always remember when my husband and I got married, the very first thing my dad sat down, both of us, and he said to my husband, he said, always live your life with respect and dignity. And you do that to yourself and you do that to others. Everything always falls into place after that. There is no such thing as prejudice when you have respect. There is no such thing as intolerance if you have respect. And there is no such thing as racism if you have respect.
I had minorities actually cry on my shoulder yesterday when I told them about that. And one of the comments that I heard over and over was, that's all we had. Back about 10 years ago, Marty Gould introduced 105 Jams to Lima, which is a radio station that targeted minorities. Minorities just absolutely were astounded that, you know, somebody would do that, because all the years that I've lived here, which is all my life, 63 years, that had never been done before. And when that happened, black people were elated here because that had never been done before. And then when they took it away, there was total distress again. I equated it with, they say in Africa, once you take away the drums from Africans, there's no way of communicating. They can't communicate. So I equated it with that. You know, there was a loss of communication, and people were distressed again. And so maybe I went a little too fast on that, but when 105 Jams was eliminated, they first moved it from FM to AM. Well, everybody who was working there at the time knew that was a kiss of death, because, you know, pretty much you do music on AM anymore, that's a kiss of death. We knew it was just a matter of time. So very shortly thereafter, they kind of booted us out the building. And until I think that was 2003 when they did that. I went on the air at Clear Channel in 2005 and worked there until Wednesday. And that's when I informed people that I had been let go at Clear Channel, and they said, that's all we had. That's all we had. I heard that about 10 or 12 times. And I was discussing that issue with some people, and they said that black people are so accustomed to those kind of circumstances that they lost the will to fight. They won't try to fight that. You know, they've been pushed down, and they just don't want to fight anymore. Because I had some people say, well, you know, we ought to do this and we ought to do that. Like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You know, there was a program on 105 Jams that was a Tom Joyner show, and he's a syndicated DJ, and it would come on every morning, and everybody would get up listening to Tom Joyner every morning. And then all of a sudden it was gone, you know, and African Americans were just disappointed. In this community, one of the things that I think holds minorities back a lot is they don't stick together. They don't get involved. If I were to say those were the major things, I would say that and the lack of fathers in the homes would be the biggest obstacles. Which is why in that article that I wrote, if you recall, I mentioned growing up on Spring Street, Mr. and Mrs. across the street, Mr. and Mrs., Mr. and Mrs., Mr. and Mrs. Because that's the kind of neighborhood I grew up in. If you go down Spring Street now, it's not like that. Single moms, no guys around. Guys migrate to bad behavior because they need other young men to reinforce what they are, or to identify who they are. And so that's when the breakdown occurred, you know, when kids started having babies and the guys were not there. And the African American community is devastated by that. Devastated. And it just was not like that when I was growing up.
Right now, I think that the Lima City schools, the school of many of those schools, are the chalice for how we're going to get students to understand each other and to understand the conditions that they're in and that kind of thing. I mean, the work that you have done that was a spin-off really from Common Threads has been absolutely incredible for preparing students in the Lima City schools to go in to become responsible citizens, to really know what's happening in the community and what the issues are. And you're doing that artfully.
Like I said about the prejudice type thing where there's different cliques, I try not to classify myself, but a lot of other people will, and it gets kind of annoying. And that's kind of my idea of how racism kind of comes into my life. Because I'll walk down the hallway and be like, oh, look at that emo chick or whatever. And it's very weird.
My definition of prejudice is a lot like racism, only it's not as strong as hatred. It might be more of a strong dislike, but not as evil or definite as a hatred.
I believe racism, in a sense, has to be taught either in a direct or indirect way. It has to be taught. I just believe that involves such a maybe a hate or a just such a feeling of superiority that it just has to be taught and believed in an unhealthy way. You know, obviously. I can't imagine just off the top of a way that you would believe that racism can be earned through experiences or just I don't believe racism can be kind of inherited, you know, based on life experiences. It has to be something that's ingrained into someone at some point, especially young enough where they're impressionable to that degree. Prejudice is, to be a little bit more lenient. I mean, I think those are all shaped by experiences. And I think that involves maybe not being as cultured sometimes, to not have been around a certain group of people to develop that understanding. I mean, can they be one of the same in some cases? Probably. But I do believe prejudices are, you can love people and have a genuine love for people, or to some degree, I guess, and allow that to be tainted based on experiences.
I think it depends on what our mission is for schools. If we are supposed to create good citizens, thinking citizens, then we need to do things that spur that, or at least help kids go into a pattern to where they're understanding what they're learning inside applies to outside. We shouldn't think that the classroom is exclusive to itself, that all the information gained there stays there. They still have to relate that to something. It's part of their lives, it's part of their community. So they need to have that as a tool so they can, outside the classroom, use that information.
I think I was a very accepting person, but I don't know. I think that the arts is a good way to express yourself, and so just using the arts to resemble a lot of different feelings and showing how you can help people and stuff just helps.
To me, it was more, it widened my view, because knowing something and actually listening to it is a complete difference. You can think you know it, but until you listen to it, you really don't.
I don't know, it could be shaped and based on so many different things, but I think prejudices are more gained through life experiences.
I'm not usually discriminated against. Sometimes I'm called short, or now because I've got braces, a brace face or metal mouth, but it's not much to me and I don't mind it, but there still are racial slurs or religious discriminations rolling around for no reason.
I think the one that stood out to me the most was Peggy, because of how they discriminated against men and women. I didn't really think of that.